catastrophic floods in Pakistan placed 1/3 of the country underwater, displacing 30 million people, some 600,000 of them seeking shelter in relief camps, leaving regions with food and medicine shortage. Meanwhile, a powerful earthquake rocked China's Sichuan province. Despite no efforts spared for rescue, many still lost their homes. These are just only two major disasters that hit our world recently, while floods, earthquake elsewhere, as well as landslides, tsunami, wildfires, and hurricanes have happened far more frequently over the past years, made worse with climate change. Emergency rescue plays a key role in mitigating losses of people and their possessions. The China International Search and Rescue, known as CISAR, is a strong team made of many unsung heroes. Recently, I had a rare chance to visit one of their training sites in the suburbs of Beijing. You're about to watch some exclusive footage from there. A team with rescuers from different regions of China joined the training session. They worked on search operations to save lives after a severe earthquake. I was guided by Zhang Yu, an instructor. So tell me more about yourself, Zhang Yu.
I'm an instructor in our training base. I have participated in Xinjiang Taxian earthquake rescue mission in 2017 and the Indonesia earthquake rescue mission in 2018 and the Idai tropical cyclone in Mozambique in 2019. I think those are very important experiences for me.
So now you are training a team of rescue operators from all over China.
Today we have 71 trainees from China Fire and Rescue Team all around the country, and they are doing the structure and collapse training from, for example, the search, the shoring, the breaking and breaching in our training base.
So what do you consider as the most important qualities of international rescuers like you?
I think it's courage, being professional under the high pressure.
Zhang Yu, the instructor, also showed us inside a tilted house, simulating the aftermath of an earthquake. I was struggling to stand and move, not to mention act on rescue operations. Wow, this is difficult, isn't it?
A little dizzy. 这个楼大概17度。
What is the best way to do it?
我们可以横着这样移，这样就不容易会眩晕。
So we just walk like this,
Yeah,
like a crab.
Like Michael Jackson.
Like Michael Jackson. Now I feel much better.
Yeah.
Yes. This is hard.
Yeah.
So now we have to move down, huh? Wow, this is challenging. But the rescuers have to train in this situation all the time.
They must do it well. And the victim always put here.
To be here,
Yeah.
and we have to try to rescue them out of this very difficult situation.
Yes.
Finally, I managed to roll out of that tilted building to meet Wei Min Liu from the Ministry of Emergency Management. Mr. Liu, thank you for showing us around.
Thank you for coming to this site. We used to train our rescuers at home and abroad.
And many of those being trained here are actually also could be on future missions to help countries around the world.
That's right. We have a China International Search and Rescue Team, which is mainly trained here. And they have participated in about 14 operations abroad, dating back to 2004. And that team was actually established in 2001. So immediately after 2 or 3 years, they joined the international humanitarian operations abroad. So many of them actually were trained here, and I think their performance were outstanding.
I understand the latest floods in Pakistan, China has been trying to extend its helping hand.
Yes, it's unfortunate that such heavy flooding happened in our very close neighbor, Pakistan. We are, as you know, all-weather partners. So it's our duty and responsibility to extend our helping hands. This ministry, played its active role in offering the international, humanitarian assistance to Pakistan, which you may know that our two Air Force planes carried about 3,000 tents to Pakistan immediately after the disaster happened. And we will have a follow-up operations after that.
Analysts pointed out that there seems to be a growing trend of developing countries trying to help one another. For example, the so-called South-South cooperation in the crisis management and also reduction. So how is that having an impact on your work?
It has a lot of impact, I should say. As you know, the South-South cooperation is the brand name of China's assistance to other developing countries. And in the meanwhile, I think a lot of international organizations, such as United Nations agencies, join this South-South cooperation. And even some developed countries join hands with China to help the developing countries. So this year is of particular significance for the South-South cooperation. High-level dialogue of the global development, which was chaired by President Xi. He presented a number of initiatives to upgrade, to strengthen the South-South cooperation. Even rename the South-South cooperation as a kind of a global development and South-South cooperation. So extending, my understanding is that extending the cooperation areas and to a larger extent. So it's very well received by international community.
Including with emerging economies, the BRICS countries, for example.
That's right. I think BRICS countries are major emerging economies and developing countries. And so we do have a particular or more proactive role to play in this regard. We not only help each other, but it's also our duty to extend our hands to other developing countries. And that's why I think this year, when China is the presidency of a BRICS mechanism, I think we presented a lot of initiatives in various areas. In my area, in the disaster prevention and management, and we conducted a series of events among, BRIC countries, but also inviting some other guest countries from the developing world.
It's a very thought-provoking process that China went through, Mr. Liu. Some point out about how to manage crisis, natural disasters. It was at the very beginning learning the best practices from other countries, mainly developed economies. And now China tried to fit all these learning experiences into the real circumstances in this country, and now even try to help developing countries. How do you see this roadmap in a way? Could be of inspiration for other developing countries.
Especially after the reform and opening up dated back in 1978, I think we have a lot of exchanges and collaboration with developed countries, with the very specified UN agencies which focus on disaster risk management, we are on sustainable development. So I think we've got a lot of help from, and a lot of, as you say, the thought-provoking ideas from developed countries. Let me give you an example. We have a lot of cooperation with Singapore and with Japan as well. So these two countries, they are all Asian countries, and we have perhaps the similar, natural disasters and other challenges to face. But also we have some experiences of conducting exchanges with European countries. Germany, which in Europe I think is a very good model to deal with natural disasters. Perhaps we have come to this stage that as a major country in the world, we do not just look after ourselves. We have to extend our hands to the developing countries, especially those countries neighboring us. For example, the ASEAN countries, South Asian countries like Pakistan, and even Afghanistan, and Central Asian countries. All these countries are our immediate neighbors. By the way, these countries are along the Belt and Road. So we have, my ministry have proposed an international cooperation framework for disaster risk reduction and emergency management. So these neighboring countries are all our priorities.
China has raised the two initiatives, the Global Development Initiative and Global Security Initiative. A lot of these has to do with how the world can cooperate for unpredictabilities that you just mentioned. How do you see your organization and China's natural disaster prevention and control reduction mechanism would be able to help?
I think we in this ministry join this and support the two initiatives in a very active manner. On the Global Development Initiative, I think without dealing with properly the natural disasters, the development cannot be sustainable. So disaster risk management is an inalienable part of sustain the economic and social development. And that's very well stated in the UN, different resolutions or initiatives in the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal, even in the Paris Accord of climate change, and mostly in the area of the disaster risk management. We do have a United Nations sponsored framework, which we call the Shendai framework for dealing with disaster risk management. So I think it's important for the disaster risk management community to join hands and to play our part in putting the Global Development Initiative into practice, and in different kinds of events sponsored or joined by this ministry. We, I think, advocated this very great initiative, and it's very well received by the international community. In the meantime, on the global security issue, I think without security or without safety, again, the development cannot be sustainable. So I think our job is to ensure people can live and produce in a peaceful and safe environment, so that their productivity can be improved or increased.
Thank you so much, Mr. Liu, for you and your team, your excellent work. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Our exclusive visit to China International Search and Rescue Team's training site took place this week, when the 77th United Nations General Assembly is ongoing at the UN headquarters in New York. One of the key topics is how to carry out important cooperation in defending common security. According to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, our world is in big trouble. Divisions are growing deeper, inequalities are growing wider, challenges are spreading farther. Global development and global security are two of the major issues that matter to everyone. How could countries work in partnership against the natural disasters and together deal with emergencies? This group gave us a lot of food for thought. Joining us, Liu Weimin, Director General of the Department of International Cooperation and Rescue with the Ministry of Emergency Management of China, and Ms. Loretta Heber-Gerarde, who is the Risk Knowledge Chief of UNDRR. Meanwhile, Professor Sai-Ni Yang, Academy of Disaster Reduction and Emergency Management with Beijing Normal University. Welcome to all of you. What do you make of the latest trends in disaster reduction and prevention?
There is undoubtedly awareness that climate change is leading to an increase in disaster risks. And we're seeing this all over the world. Just look at Pakistan right now, where 1/3 of the country is underwater from extreme rains. So within this context, we are seeing a real desire of the international community to come together and to work better towards avoiding countries experiencing losses and damages. So one of the initiatives I would mention that the Secretary General of the United Nations just announced was early warning for all in the next 5 years. But not all countries actually have early warning systems. So I would point to one trend that will be announced at the upcoming COP in Sharm el-Sheikh on climate change, will be the plan of action of the UN to scale up early warning for all in the next 5 years.
What's likely to be China's role, Professor Yang, in that sense?
In China, basically, we share the same trend. So from the loss perspective. Then from the early warning preparedness side, I think China, at least in China, there are three trends. The first is we are actively transformed from passive disaster response to a more active and strategic resilience-based risk governance. I think that's a first very good trend. The second is I noticed that there is an increase in infrastructure investment, especially for disaster prevention. And also in China, we see a clear trend in the investment in early warning system. I think that's also very positive. And the third is that I see the awareness for cascading effect and compound effect of disaster. So in this way, we should say this systematic approach is starting to be accepted by the Chinese government. These three trends are the positive part.
Mr. Liu, of course, earlier we had a discussion already, but mainly it's about your ministry and China's major approach in disaster relief after disaster happened. Now, with the trends that the two ladies talk about, what's likely to be the future direction?
Yeah, I think there is for me, two clear global trends here. First of all, it's a kind of a shift from post-disaster recovery to pre-disaster preparedness and risk reduction. Even in China, where I think there is a increasing awareness of that importance. Secondly, the resilience building is very important. Resilience of infrastructures, resilience of cities, resilience of our communities. So for me, these are two very important issues. My ministry is working very hard with UNDRR, with other developing countries, as well as developed countries, to face up to those challenges. And we are not only building up our resilience at home, but also we try to help others building up the resilience abroad. And I think for China, which is a increasing major country in the world, it's our obligation and responsibility.
What about that kind of cooperation in the direction of resilience with China?
It's absolutely critical, and China has a huge experience in this field. It has done an enormous amount of work in disaster risk reduction in its own country, and I'm really pleased to see that it has been ensuring that some of its practices are shared in international fora and through training workshops and in events such as the United Nations platforms on disaster risk reduction. I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for China to contribute to resilience through the work it's doing in the Belt and Road Initiative, for example, which is quite an important investment and has been mentioned, the investment in resilient infrastructure and making sure that all the planning and the work that's going on through the Belt and Road is made resilient, is based on risk assessments, takes into account the climate future, will be a tremendous contribution to generations moving forward.
Mr. Liu, we noticed the Secretary General of the United Nations in the latest interview on the sideline of the UN General Assembly talking about the failure to face up to the climate change as suicidal. That is the word he especially used this time. Now, China has already been working on the 2030-2060 agenda and also, meanwhile, on its specific emergency plan from 2021 to 2025. So, which stage is China realizing the danger of this? Which stage do you see resilience building involving pretty much about what's likely to happen with climate change and the concrete actions for it?
Well, for China, I think climate change and global warming is real. We do not turn a blind eye to that as somebody in the world. I think we are gearing up in our efforts to face up to this challenge. And I think the climate change adaptation is taken into consideration. I mean, as far as our national plan for the comprehensive disaster prevention and reduction is concerned. So we do introduce a lot of new major tasks and measures to handle this very difficult issue. In terms of the resilience building, I think we have introduced, quite a number of very impressive measures, in which I think 3 of them are worth mentioning. One is first national survey of the natural disasters hazard in China. And the second one, of course, is we introduced 90 projects for prevention and control of natural hazards. And the third one, I think worth of mentioning is the empowerment of new technology. China is in some areas quite advanced in this area. So we want to use this new technology into, the natural disasters or disaster risk reduction effort.
What about cooperation in Asia Pacific region, in Asia in particular?
The battle on climate change and disaster risk reduction will be won or lost in Asia Pacific. It is the region where climate change impacts are really being felt the most strongly, but it's also the region where you have got tremendous momentum to scale up. We look at China, which is doing tremendous work in this field, but there's Japan as well. And there are other countries that have really recognized that they need to invest in resilience. And I'm very glad to say that we're seeing a lot of momentum on urban level resilience, and this is extremely important. So some of the collaboration that we have in the region is around making cities resilient, where we're really trying to work at the city level and as locally as possible. And there are also platforms that exist, for example, ASEAN, as well as the Pacific Regional Forum. And these are groupings of countries that are coming together and sharing experiences and sharing knowledge. And this is all very critical. And I think that as we build momentum on climate change, we must not forget that first and foremost, we have to reduce the carbon emissions. And I think that we cannot seriously talk about resilience unless we recognize that as long as we keep relying on fossil fuels, the problem will only get worse. So I hope to see more regional collaboration and more countries really stepping up on their commitments to the Paris Agreement at the same time that they work together on climate change adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and resilience building.
Global difficulty, global challenges requires global cooperation. So I think China, as well as the Asia Pacific, are the most disaster-prone areas in the world. So, we have perhaps a special obligation or responsibility to work together with other countries to handle this issue. And that's why China launched the Belt and Road International Cooperation Framework for Natural Disasters and Emergency Management. And that's why we launched many cooperation mechanisms with ASEAN, within the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And we are trying to reach out to Central Asian countries all those neighboring countries, we want to help in this regard, but we do not stop at the border. I mean, we want to cooperate with Africa, with Latin America. By the way, we just concluded a China-Latin America Ministerial Forum on Disaster Risk Reduction. China this year is the chair of BRICS mechanism. And so we want to take advantage of this opportunity to work together with other BRICS countries to play a more proactive role in this regard, because BRICS countries, they are all major emerging economies and developing countries in, various continents. So obviously we can play a specific role in our own region or in our own continent. Right. And so we will not stop at home. We will try to reach out.
I see tons of starting point, because Asian countries basically share a lot of common issues and the challenges. We see this unreasonable land use planning, and we are facing the challenge of same extreme floods, precipitation, temperature. So how can we share data, process data? How can we proceed with the more advanced risk assessment? How can we design a better early warning system, monitoring system? I see so many science technology common interests and common challenge that we can immediately start some collaboration. So, so I think, of course, another thing is for education. How can we co-design some resilience-oriented education for Asian countries, because we have so much in common, right? So all this leave us a huge space for cooperation. So we just need to do it.
Cooperation is the key, and action needs to be followed. Thank you so much for all of you for joining us. Loretta Girardi, Liu Wenming, and Sai-Ni Yang. Thank you so much. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for being with us. Bye for now.